case you didn't understand that, I said Stargrunt 2. Hey guys, Gus here, and in case you didn't get it the first 2 times that I said it, I'm talking about Stargrunt 2. And I thought that it only appropriate to dress in a fashion befitting a game that is so realistic and that is so darn good. This is one of my favourite war games of all times, and in fact my favourite war game in the sci-fi category. So this one takes the cake for sci-fi for me personally. Alrighty, so today I'm going to be discussing all the points in the of the game, its design, where it comes from, who made it, etc. The rulebook itself, and also a little demonstration of how to play the game. So let's get on with it then. Right, enough of this silliness. Okay, so the game Stargrunt 2 then was designed by a chap called John Tuffley, all the way back in 1996. So it is a fairly old game. We're looking at 18 odd years ago this game was designed. But still, in my opinion, one of the best sci-fi games, and for me it is my favourite sci-fi game of all time, and I'll tell you why. So the game is designed for either 15 or 25mm miniatures, so 15 or 25mm scale, and the scale of the actual game, the size of the games that you play, are generally roughly about platoon level plus, which is to say a platoon of infantry, so 40 or so guys with support elements, so like snipers, maybe a few heavy weapons, mortars, infantry fighting vehicles, things like that. The rule set itself is actually a generic rule set. John Tuffley, who is the CEO of Ground Zero Games, does produce miniatures for the game, which I might say are absolutely superb. Particularly the 15mm range, I think, are the best 15mm sci-fi miniatures out there. They are fantastic. That's why I own a shitload of them. But it is a generic rule set. It can be used with any miniatures you want. I've actually heard of a lot of people playing this game with Warhammer 40,000 miniatures and saying that it is actually a more enjoyable experience playing Warhammer 40,000 with Stargrunt 2 rules than it is actually playing Warhammer 40k. So the core concepts of the game then is it generally uses opposed rolls, which is to say that when you're doing things like close combat or ranged combat, or any sort of opposed actions, you will roll a dice against your opponent and you'll match off the scores that you roll. And the way that your units are rated in this game is you don't have a stat line. What you have is you have generic ratings, and you can purchase a token set from Ground Zero Games, and each one of the colours of the tokens will correspond to a dice in ascending order. So yellow being the worst kind of troops, green being second up from that, your blue are like your average trained soldiers, your orange are like your more elite troops, and then your red are like your super duper special forces type of troops. Okay, and that's the kind of rating system. Now each one of these will then correspond to a dice, and the dice are color coded, and you can buy color coded dice from Ground Zero Games as well, and they're very cheap. They're like £4 for your dice set. So that'll be 4-sided dice, that'll be 6-sided dice, 8-sided, 10-sided, and 12-sided. So from your worst to your best troops, and that's the rating system that they use. So you'll have all those different troop types from worst to best, and those squads for their like essentially ability checks will be rolling that particular kind of dice. So your better troops will be rolling a larger dice, so they can get much larger scores. Right? So that's the way it works. And then you'll see. So in addition to the color codes, you'll see a number, and that's the command value. And the command value is lower the better, really, because what you're always trying to do is you're trying to roll above command checks, so things like communication and orders. You want to roll your squad's ability dice, and you want to roll above the actual value on there, so your command value. And things like communicating between squads, what you do is you add the numbers together, and then you roll your squad's ability dice, try and get above that. So say for example your average is 2. So one squad communicating across the battlefield to another squad, and they're both average, have average commanders, so it's 2 plus 2 is 4. You're going to roll an 8-sided dice, try and get above that. So that's the way command works. So color coded for troop rating system, and then numbers assigned for command value of the various units. And then what you've got is you've got morale. Now morale in the game works, again you've got a set of counters, and going from best morale to worst, you've got confident, you've got steady, you've then got shaken, you've then got broken and routed. So of course, confident troops being confident troops, they're more likely to take on tasks. They're not going to have to take leadership checks and morale value checks as much. Then your troops, as they start taking casualties, as they start getting pinned down in combat, those tokens then, be quiet you, silly cat. Shh, I'm trying to do a review. Hey, get away! So those values can then go down. So as your troops take casualties, they get suppressed, they can become, from say for example, steady troops, so they're okay, they're good to go, to being shaken, which makes them actually have to take morale checks even more often. And eventually you get down to broken and routed, which is where your troops are like, fuck this, we're going home. That's us out of here. Okay, so that's essentially the way your squads will be rated. Okay, so they'll have one coloured token next to the squad, and then one morale status token next to them as well. So each squad will have two little tokens which can change throughout the game. Okay, so that's the way that units are rated, and that's as well as vehicles, infantry, and units on the board. Primarily it focuses on infantry. It's an infantry based game, and I like that because it's realistic, and infantry are, dare I say it, the kings of the battlefield. Everything revolves around infantry. You can't have armour without support of infantry, because they'll just get wiped out. Infantry can take and hold ground, infantry can take out other infantry that are dug in, etc, etc. They really are the core of a battlefield, and that's what I like about this game. It focuses on the infantrymen. So that's the rating systems for your troops then, which I find quite unique. And the fact that you're using all these dice in a sliding scale, and I'll go more into that later on in the review. The way that opposed dice rolls will work, or combat will work, a quick example is, for example, fire combat. So what you do is you have your quality dice, so your average troops, which is blue, they roll d8. So remember what I said, d4, d6, d8, d10, d12. They're going to be rolling an 8-sided dice. And then what they do is, in your squad, so you can assign your squad how many guys you want. So you can have 8-man, like British sections of troops, or you can have 10-man squads, or what have you. I've broken my guys down into fire teams, into 4-man fire teams. So what you do is each weapon, so like assault rifles and what have you, have what's called a firepower value. Okay, so an advanced assault rifle will have a firepower value of 2. And then what you do is you add the firepower values of all the troops in the squad. So for example, if it's a 4-man fire team and they've got firepower 2 weapons, that's going to be another d8. So you use your value dice, which is 8-sided, because I'll make it attack now, remember, and then you use your firepower dice, okay, which is also an 8, because remember your firepower times 4 is an 8. Okay, and then if you've got any support weapons, they themselves actually have their own special dice they roll. So for example, if you've got like squad assault weapons, like machine guns and stuff, they can add an extra dice. But the attacker will always roll 2 dice. Then what happens is, the defender gets to roll the dice. Okay, now the defender's dice is determined by the range, or how far he is away. And again, this ties into the troop value. I think it's really, very clever the way this works. So for example, if you've got conscript troops, like really bad yellow rated troops, they've got a D4. So their range bands work in 4-inch increments, right? So your average squads have 8-inch increments, and so on and so forth. So for every increment away in a range band, the defender they go up 1 dice. So for example, if I'm firing my average troops at an enemy, okay, and they're within 8 inches, they get a 4-sided dice to roll for defense. If they're up to 16 inches, then they get a D6. Up to 24 inches, then get a D8, and so on and so forth. So that way, your worst trained troops are like worse shots, they're less steady, they're not as confident with their weapons, and your elite troops can really stay calm in the battle, range out, and start taking people out with their weapons, okay? And then what happens is, remember I spoke about the sliding scale of dice now, with your defender's dice, so you've worked out how far away he is. So let's say for argument's sake he's range band 2. Your defenders are going to be rolling a D6, okay? And now what happens is, you work out what kind of cover they are, the defenders are in. If they're in no cover, if they're in the open, they just get their D6. That's it, okay? If they're in soft cover, they then go up a dice, so it's sliding scale again, it goes up to a D8. If they're in hard cover, because there's 2 kinds of cover, soft and hard, so if they're like bunkered down in a building, they go up 2 dice, so they'll get a D10 instead, alright? And then, if you've used an action to dig your troops in, they go up a further dice. So that way the defender can actually, if you position your troops properly and you play well and tactically, and you use cover well, they can defend themselves quite well. Then what you do is you roll the dice, okay, and it depends on the number of successes. So the defender will roll and the attacker will roll. If the attacker gets no successes against the defender, i.e. doesn't beat his score, okay, nothing happens. The fire is ineffective. If he beats his score with one of his dice, then the opponents are pinned. Okay, so you've managed to suppress them with your fire. Okay, you've not caused any casualties, but you've managed to suppress them. Alright? If you beat the defender's score with 2 dice, you then pin them, you start to potentially cause wounds. The way that wounds work is you total up your scores of both those dice that you beat the opponent by, and you then divide it by the range dice that you had to use. Okay, so for example in this case it was D6. Okay, and that way you can work out your potential wounds. And once you've worked out the potential number of wounds, weapons have what's called an impact value. Okay, and then enemies will have an armor value. So it's like armor saves essentially. So for each potential wound you've caused, you roll your impact dice. So for small arms it might be a 6-sided dice. Okay, and then your enemy, the guy you're shooting at, then rolls his armor saves. Okay, whatever armor he's wearing, a certain dice, right? And in that way you can cause wounds. And then the way it works then, okay, I know it sounds like quite a long step, but once you get used to it, it's actually very quick. And then once that happens, and you've caused wounds on the enemy, they then take casualties. And when I say they take casualties in this game, it's not like in most other games where, oh, you take casualty, you take a figure off the board. No, no, no. In this game, when you take a casualty, it's a casualty. He stays on the board, he's wounded, and it affects the morale of your squads. If you've got guys that are dying or wounded in your squad, you essentially have to spend action points to, in your turn, to try and heal and fix your guy up. If you then decide to leave wounded members behind, it really affects morale. Your morale, say your troops start going down. Because think about it, your fellow soldiers and you're leaving your wounded guys behind, they're going to be like, fuck this, we're not sticking around for this shit anymore. You know what I mean? So in that way, it's such a realistic system, and that's the basic overview and the sort of sliding opposed dice roll system that the game uses. And I'm actually going to do an example of play. Okay guys, what I'm going to do first is just show you some of the actual miniatures that Ground Zero Games produce, just to show you how good these are. I've bought the 15mm versions. Now check some of these bad boys out. How good are those for 15mm scale miniatures? You know, and I've painted these guys up. And check what they look like when you've got them organised into an actual platoon. They look absolutely frickin' kick-ass awesome. So in my opinion, these are top-notch, if not the best, sci-fi 15mm miniatures going. I think they are absolutely fantastic. Not only that, I bought these guys as a starting army, and please do excuse me, the other guys are unpainted, but these Krusty's aliens, which are actually taken from the film District 9. Sure, you can hear the popping brew. So, and they got like these cool power armored suits and all that sort of stuff. That's one thing I forgot to mention. There is power armor in the game, and check out these little power armor teams I've put together. Check out kick-ass that looks. Marine power armor infantry. And by the way, power armor in this game is freaking badass. It's really difficult to deal with. And they've got all sorts of miniatures for like snipers. I've put together little sniper teams here. They paint up really quickly, and they're just freaking awesome miniatures. So I'll just go through a very quick explanation and demonstration of... when I was explaining it, it may have sounded quite clunky and difficult to understand, but one of the things that speeds it up is not only the use of the counters, but also the record sheets that are included in the rules, where you pretty much do all the maths when you make your army list right at the start. So that significantly speeds the actual game up. So what we're going to go through here is just a quick example of how fire combat in this game works. And this is the kind of the basic mechanic, opposed dice rolls and what have you. So as you can see in front of you, the guys on the left are United Nations Space Command infantry. They are average infantry, which means they get an 8-sided dice, hence the blue marker, and the 1 indicates their command value, and 1 is very good command, the lower the better, and at the moment they are confident. And against them we have the Krusty Aliens. They are confident, they are green, which means they get a 6-sided dice, so they're a bit worse, and their commander is absolutely crap. He doesn't know what he's doing, which is 3, which is the worst. Okay, so in the game then, if we're going to make a firing attack, so let's say the UNSC guys, the Space Command guys, are firing against the Crusties, okay? So remember, the attackers are always going to roll a minimum of 2 dice, okay? Which is their quality dice, which is the blue dice, and then their firepower dice. So now remember what I said about firepower. So when you look at the actual book, let me just show you the list here really quickly. You can see in front of you the various weapons lists with firepower and also impact. So these guys have got 4 men in their team, and they have assault rifles, which is firepower 2. So that means they get another 8-sided dice, because remember, each man has firepower 2. You add them all together, and that gives you a dice. So they get 2 8-sided dice to roll against the enemy. And then, if you want to add it in, they can have things like machine guns and what have you. So if you see this guy that's prone down here, right, he's got a light machine gun. And a light machine gun will give you an extra dice to add in. So we'll just discount it for now. Normally he'd get an extra 8-sided dice, so they'd be wearing 3. But let's just do these 2 for now. Your range bands are measured by your quality. So these guys will measure their range bands in 8-inch lengths, and these guys would measure in 6-inch lengths because they're worse troops. So what you do is you measure your range, get your tape measure out, and let's just say for argument's sake, these guys are range band 2, which means they are within 8 and 16. So they are range band 2. Okay? So when you're working out your range bands, you ignore their quality dice. Ignore that. First range band is always a D4. Second range band is a D6, and so on. Okay? So say these guys are range band 2, which means they get their 6-sided dice. Alrighty. If they're in soft cover, that goes up to a D8. Okay? If they're in hard cover, like a building, that goes up to a D10. Okay? Now each squad in the game, when you activate them throughout your turn and you're moving them, etc., you get 2 activations per squad. So you can move, most guys will move 6 inches, light infantry will move 8, guys in power armor, some guys can actually move faster in power armor and so on, but the average is normally about a 6. Okay, so that's an activation. So you get 2 activations. Another activation is things like communicating. Another activation is like a regroup, where you treat your casualties, as I mentioned before. And then another type of activation is like digging in, okay, and that will increase the dice further. Okay, so let's say for this example that because they're at range band 2, their defensive dice is a 6, okay? But let's say they're in soft cover, okay, and they've dug in, which bumps them up by 2, which means they get to roll a 10-sided dice for defense. Okay, so let's just go ahead and roll the dice. Roll a defense dice first, which is a 6, nice average roll, and the attack dice, ooh, which is a 6 and an 8. Now in this game, you have to beat the score, okay? It's not a case of equaling the score, you have to beat the score, okay? So that 6 doesn't count, which means the attacker has beaten the defender by 1, okay? Which means you get suppressed. If you beat the defender by 2 dice, you can cause casualties. By 1 dice, you can get suppressed, okay? So in this case, the crusty aliens would be suppressed. So you place down a suppression token, and suppression is in your activation, sorry, in your turn, you then got to spend an activation to do like a regroup, like a leadership test, to become unsuppressed, or you just stay there with your head down because the rounds are whizzing all over the place. Let's just say, for this example, that the crusties were beaten by 2. The way you work out casualties, okay, let's take away the defender's dice, is you add these 2 dice together, okay, and then you divide them by the range dice, alright? So 8 plus 7 is 15, okay, divided by the range dice. Remember, the initial range dice was only a d6, okay, 6 goes into 15 twice. So that's 2 potential casualties. So once you've worked out your potential wounds, is you've got 2 wounds, and you roll your weapon's impact dice. Now you always use the lowest dice. So say for example there's a special weapon in here that has like a really high impact dice. You can split fire, but if you're combining fire you always use the lowest. So a low-tech assault rifle's impact dice is D8. Okay, and remember you've got 2 potential wounds, so you roll it twice. And then you have the armor value of the squad you're shooting at. So say for example the crusties are like a medium armor. Okay, because of their natural armor, they've got chitinous skin, they're naturally resilient to being shot at. So say they've got an armor value of d6s. So it's quite simple. You roll your wound dice, and then you roll your armor value dice. Alrighty. In this case, the defenders have got a 6 and a 5, okay, and the attackers have got a 7 and a 3. If your impact dice is greater than that of the armor dice, you cause a wound. If your impact dice is more than double that of the armor save. So say for example one of these was a 1, that's an insta-kill. Okay, so the way it works is a wound counter is a white skull, okay, and a kill counter is a black skull. So that means that that squad has got a dead soldier. Alright, one of those soldiers is dead in that squad. And remember what I said before, you can't leave him behind or else it will affect morale and your troops won't want to carry on fighting. Okay, and then in the following turn, what you can do is, with your potential casualties, your white skulls, you can, within the squad, you can try and heal them as part of one of your actions. And then if you manage to heal him, you get a wounded soldier turns into a stabilized soldier, or potentially even a dead soldier, and you can actually have squad medics to increase the chances of actually fixing that soldier. So that is the way that the mechanics work. Yes, it seems clunky, okay, but like all games, once you get used to it, it flows really, really quickly, okay? And it's a really realistic, really intuitive system. Once you get used to it, it flows really fast. And that's the way that the basic mechanic of the game works. So the bonuses of this game then, what I think about it, okay, it's very realistic. It's an extremely realistic game. I mean, you've got all sorts of other elements in this game. I've just covered the very basic core mechanic of the game, okay? Like I said, it sounds complicated, but as you saw in the actual demonstration I just did, it's once you get used to it, it flows very quickly, okay? It's just difficult to explain, that's all. It's extremely realistic. If you are a soldier or an ex-soldier in real life, or really if you are a wargamer, if you are a true wargamer and you want to reenact realistic platoon-sized battles on a tabletop, this is the game. I'm telling you now, it is super realistic. It's absolutely great. And within this, you've got all sorts of other things. I mean, you've got communications. You can have communication equipment for your troops. You've got snipers, which are really, really badass in this game as well. They're a real pain in the ass. They can pin guys down and all sorts. You've got your individual commanders, your overall commanders. You've got support weapons. You've got artillery that can start firing off the board. You've got airstrikes that can come in. You can lay landmines down. You can have concealed troops throughout the battlefield. It's absolutely great. Okay, it's just one of those games that I don't know. I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so a couple of good points for the game. Of course, I'll mention bad points. Every game has got bad points, but good points for the game is, for a start, the rules are free. I got these rules printed out for me by a buddy that owns a printer shop. Okay. But the rules on the Ground Zero Games website are completely free. I'll put the link in below. You can download them. They're a PDF, free of charge. Okay. On the site, then, I prefer the 15mm scale. You can use up to like Warhammer, 40k scale if you want. I prefer 15mm scale, just because I like the 15mm miniatures as the Ground Zero Games does. And their starter armies are like $35. That's it. Free rules, $35, and literally that is all you're going to need. Okay, because you're only going up to like platoon size plus in this game. Okay. The service from the bloke is excellent as well, absolutely great. So yes, there are negative points. The negative points in the game then are a couple of things that people find quite strange. They're not necessarily negative, but they're just odd, or odd by modern standards anyway. It's hard to get into purely because of the way that the rulebook is written. It's very reminiscent of older rule sets, the way that it's written. It is slightly more difficult to understand, to grasp the concepts when you first read the rulebook. It takes a couple of reads to get used to it and to really grasp the concept. But that is offset by the scenarios they have at the back of the book, which are like green training scenarios, which are very good for learning the game. Like if you and a buddy want to learn the game, you run through the green training scenarios, they're excellent. And then the layout of the book is not optimal. There's a few things that could be better. It's not ideally and intuitively laid out, but they're free rules. Come on. So the other thing that this game doesn't have is so there's no like list building, and I know a lot of people found that odd, and I found it odd too. And the thing is that one of the things that it is mitigated by is scenarios. The game encourages you to play specific scenarios, so like hostage rescue or reconnaissance in force, or direct attack, and such like. So one of the best ways to do it is to actually get a third party, so get like a buddy or somebody who's going to be like the game master to like write a scenario down, and they've got all the sheets in here to do it, to actually like write a scenario down for you and organize your forces for you, and then give you up the sheets, you and your opponent get your sheets and you go, right, this is our force organisation given to us by our commanders, then you go out on your mission. So in that way it's kind of mitigated, and I think it's really good in that way that you get kind of a third party to write a scenario for you. In that way it's inherently going to be slightly unbalanced, but it's going to be a lot of fun because you're getting like almost like a mission and your orders from your superior commanders. It's great. And the other thing I would say is, not necessarily again a negative point, but it's something that needs to be noted, is what I mentioned at the beginning, is that it's an emphasis on infantry. If you are really into your tanks and your aircraft and things like that, then you'd still probably enjoy the game, but the emphasis is on infantry. The author has, it seems to me the author has intentionally slightly underpowered vehicles and really streamlined vehicle rules and artillery and things like that. But the fact that they're there is very good. So the emphasis is on your platoon. It's on your infantryman, it's on your foot soldier on the ground, but I like that. You know, some people might not like that, but I do.
Hey, what you doing?
So, my thoughts on Stargrunt 2. In my opinion, this is my favourite sci-fi game. Honestly, it takes the cake. I think that it is timeless, it's well designed, it's from 18 years ago, and these rules are still the best out there for sci-fi platoon level wargaming. They are absolutely fucking fantastic. And they're free. There is no reason, if you are a wargamer, not to give this a bash. It really is good. It's very realistic, it is extremely tactical, and if you don't know me by now, when I play a wargame, I like to engage my brain. I don't want a game that's overly simplified and not particularly thought-provoking. The thing with this game is you need to think tactically, you need to use your brain, you need to engage with the game and really think and act as essentially a platoon commander would act in real life. And this is coming from our perspective as a soldier, okay? It really is good. So overall then guys, highly recommended. If you're a gamer, the rules are free. You don't have to use the miniatures. You can use your 40k miniatures or whatever you want. If you're looking for an alternative system to the major sci-fi games out there, this is it. Rules are free. You can use any miniatures you want. Get you and a buddy. Give this game a bash. I'm telling you now, you will not regret it. It is excellent. Alright guys, I hope you've enjoyed my review on Stargrunt 2. Take care.